All right. Hi, everybody. I am so glad to be here. If this is your first webinar with me, will you just say, I was going to say something inappropriate. Will you say, this is my first? Or if you've been before, tell me if you've been before. Because there's a chance that you have heard me talk about this if you've seen me in the past. I already saw some names in here that I'm already familiar with. So thank you so much for coming. If you've come to another webinar and you've come back, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to be talking over this direction because I have two screens, and I think it's easier for me to look this direction. So it's not that I'm not engaged, it's just that I'm looking over here. So some of you, this is your first webinar with me. I am so glad you're here. Hopefully, I'm going to answer all the questions you didn't even know you had about interactive read aloud. So we're going to talk about the comprehension part of the science of reading. This is one of those, I'm going to go ahead and shut this chat because I'm like one of those people, like I cannot look at chat and then do my slide. All of a sudden I get like distracted. I'm like that 4-year-old in your classroom that's like with your 5-year-olds. But we're going to talk about the comprehension part of science of reading and how this all works together. So let's get rolling. Let's see. So we're going to talk about what the science is behind comprehension. I'm going to show you how to plan for an interactive read aloud. And I'm going to show the structure of a close reading. A close reading is a way of also saying interactive read aloud. So I'll use those terms kind of as if they were the same thing. And I'm going to show some strategies that you can use with any book. So let's get started. So this is one of my favorite quotes, that reading and writing float on a sea of talk. So we want to make sure that talking is a big part of our reading and our read aloud, which some people are like, no, we don't want to have them talking, but I'm going to share how that's going to work. And I'm going to talk about background knowledge as one of the greatest predictors of comprehension. So we're going to be building background knowledge for students. Listening comprehension is built through language interaction, and it's an essential precondition to reading comprehension. You are welcome to take photos, screenshots of any of these slides if you want to hang on to some of these quotes. And listening comprehension begins long before children can begin to decode. It begins as they learn to understand and use language. So let's give it a try. Here's what happens. We have our language processing system, right? And so when we hear a word or a sentence, it activates that meaning processing center. So if I said to you, he really needed a file, you're instantly going back, hopefully, going back and thinking about what you know about somebody who might need a file, a guy who might need a file, okay? So you're thinking, it could be a file folder, it could be a file on his computer, or it could be a nail file, okay? So right now, our language processing center is trying to make meaning. So it reviews our stored vocabulary for possible meanings of the word file. Now I'm going to add more to it. I'm going to add some context. He last saw it in his bag. So you're right now going, it can't be a computer file because we wouldn't see that in our bag. So it could be a file folder or a nail file. And then if I add more context to it, he really hated getting hangnails. Now you have crossed out the ones it couldn't be, and you know that it's got to be a nail file. Even though you understood each word, you had to shift your thinking with each sentence. So he really needed a file. He last saw it in his bag. He hated getting hangnails. I hate getting hangnails too. So reading comprehension and listening comprehension share the same 3 language processing systems. And one of the things that research is showing is that silent reading is never really silent. So for me, if I'm reading something very complex, it needs to be quiet. Even if I'm reading it in my head. So if I'm reading something like a really complex text, I need it to be very quiet. So if there's a lot of noise in the background, I'm like all of a sudden shushing everybody. I mean, if it's in my house, I'm not if like I'm in public. And so I want to make sure that it's very quiet because I'm actually listening to myself read it, even though I'm reading quietly, okay? Even if I'm reading silently. And if it is so complex, sometimes I have to read it out loud, okay? So silent reading is really never silent. Listening to spoken language, whether aloud or that internal right? That internal phonological codes happens every time we read and comprehend text. So comprehension is really the ability to understand spoken word. And we build our comprehension through listening and shared stories, through conversations, and through interactions with text. So we're going to talk a little bit about the learning circle, and then we're going to get into the practical. Okay, so hang with me. So whenever we hear information, it helps to create understanding, which helps modify what we already know, our knowledge, and it generates our interest, and it helps us direct our attention where we can select new information. So this is the circle of learning. So whenever we get new information, it helps to really create that understanding, and it modifies what we already know. It makes us sometimes more interested. It helps us direct our attention towards new knowledge that we need to gain on that subject. So what does this mean in the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, even all the way up to fifth grade? What does an interactive read aloud mean? It means that the teacher is doing the reading work. So they're doing all the decoding and the students are doing the thinking work. So teacher is reading, but the students are actively involved in the meaning making. And what we must do is stretch students to the limits of their listening comprehension. So when they're in kindergarten, we know that they come in with a pretty good listening comprehension ability. When we think about the types of books that a student might read in kindergarten, especially if we're talking about decodable reading right now, they're very simple sentences. They're not complex. I always joke that's always about some kind of fat cat that's sitting on somebody's lap. We're not talking about really complex language structure, very simple language. And most of our students already have a listening comprehension that far exceeds what they can decode on their own. So we want to have an opportunity so that we can stretch their listening comprehension. We want to practice oral language, and we also want to build that background knowledge. So during a read aloud, students are getting new ideas, they're getting exposed to new ideas, they're learning new language structures, they're learning new vocabulary and new concepts. And we're going to do the decoding until they can decode the text on their own. So usually, like I said, students in that kindergarten, first grade, second grade, their listening comprehension skills exceed what they encounter in those primary grades. So comprehension problems actually remain hidden until their listening comprehension falls behind the text complexity. So what we don't want to have happen is a student go through kindergarten and first grade and second grade, right? And now it looks like their comprehension is breaking down. If we haven't been practicing building that listening comprehension, that problem might be hidden. However, if we're doing interactive read alouds in kindergarten and first grade, and we're noticing that all of our students are doing really well with listening comprehension, and we have this one or two students who's not able to comprehend what is being said orally, then it kind of raises the flag, and now we can dive a little bit deeper for that, okay? So we don't want to have that happen. We don't want to have things hidden. So we must make sure that students have access to complex texts that strengthen their listening comprehension skills. So again, here's that simple view of reading. If you've been in any science of reading kind of presentation in the past, a lot of times people are focusing on phonics, phonemic awareness, right? We're going to be looking at that language comprehension part. And within language comprehension, we have fluency. Certainly, we have to make sure that we're reading, the teacher is modeled reading in a fluent manner. But we also have to have text comprehension and also vocabulary. If any of those things are missing, reading comprehension is not going to be complete. So we want to make sure all of those things are strengthened. So how is it different, an interactive read aloud versus a regular read aloud? In an interactive read aloud, the teacher is reading the text, same in both of those. In an interactive read aloud, multiple interpretations are welcome, but with a regular read aloud or a historical read aloud, teachers are going to ask questions and call on students until the right answer is given. In an interactive read aloud, students engage in meaning making that's transferable to the other texts. During a regular read aloud, we're hoping that our students are sitting quietly, right? During an interactive read aloud, we're going to ask students to talk to help build understanding. In a regular read aloud, students are asked to demonstrate understanding. So they're just very different, subtly different. I know that when I started teaching, my first teaching job was in San Diego. I taught at San Diego Unified School District. We were, Title I school, 100% free and reduced lunches, 96% second language learners. In my classroom, I had like 6 or 7 different languages. And so we did interactive read alouds a lot in 2nd grade. And, this was, like my first couple of years teaching. And so I was kind of learning how to do it. And one of the things that I would do is I would have, my little notebook, and I have all of my students' name on there. And then I would ask questions, and then I would make sure that I called on every student, right? Today I'm going to make sure I call on these 5 students. Tomorrow I'm going to call on these 5 students. So what I was noticing was happening is when I'm just calling on a few students, those students who aren't being picked to talk, or aren't selected to talk, tend to kind of sit back and let other people do the work. Tell me if you identify with this. Maybe you're doing a lesson and you ask a question and everybody's hand goes up because they know that's what you're supposed to do. Everybody's hand goes up, and then you call on a student and they say, I forgot. Then you say, don't worry, honey. I'll come back to you, listen to your friends, I might give you an idea. Then you ask this student over here, the other student that you just said they forgot, their hand goes back up, and then they repeat what that student just said. So that is something that you identify with. I know I identified with it a lot. So instead of, being that quiz show, right, where I'm going to call on some students and other students are ready to play the odds because maybe they won't be called on. Instead, we're going to have students turn to talk. So every single day they have an active part in that meaning making. Okay, it is such a great oral language opportunity for students, especially for your second language learners. It's just a great way for you to help them build understanding. And now all of a sudden, everybody gets to participate and everybody is participating. So it's a collaborative process in the interactive read aloud. And then we ask our students to respond in writing. And why do we do that? Is because we want to make sure we make their thinking visible. So this was one of the first responses I did with my class when Deanna and I wrote our engaging readers units, and it was for the snowy day. And the question was, what do you think happened to Peter's snowball? What evidence from the text helps you to know this? So when Deanna and I were planning these lessons, I was then teaching at a different title school, kindergarten, and she said, I think we should have an inference question in here. And I was like, whoa. First of all, I teach kindergarten and my students aren't used to inferring, and I teach at a title school, and I was also the ESL teacher, so I had all the second languages in my classroom. I said, I just don't think my class can do that. And she said, Deedee, just try it. And I'm like, well, I don't think they can. She said, Deedee, just try it. I went to school. This was like the 2nd or 3rd day of doing these lessons, and my class did it. It was amazing. But what I found was I had a hard time accepting the fact that I had underbaked my instruction for so long, because I said, well, my class can't do that, right? In reality, our students can do a lot of really deep thinking. We just have to kind of build the road for them so that they can do this. So for this book, we asked them what happened. What do you think happened to the snowball? And this student says, I think the snowball melted. What's the evidence? You can see it with the picture. So oftentimes, students' ability to transcribe might not be there yet. So they can also give it through a picture. They can draw a picture as well. One of the things we want to make sure if we're going to do an interactive read aloud is we have to have a good book. We have to have a book that we're willing to spend 5 days with, because we go back to that text again and again and again. So you absolutely have to have a great book. Here are a few of my favorite books. I love Cynthia Rylant, so you'll see her books pop up quite a bit in our list. Bob Graham's book, How to Heal a Broken Wing, begs to be read again and again. It is so good. If you haven't read that one, it is amazing. Anything by Nicola Davies is amazing. That's Ice Bear. Nicola Davies and Cynthia Rylant are my go-to authors whenever I want to think about word choice, where I want to have an elevated level of discussion around the words that the author used. So they're great for writing instruction and also for read aloud. I'm going to tell you a story about how to heal a broken wing. I was teaching kindergarten, and we had my teacher right next door. She had to leave early. I don't remember, doctor's appointment, child's orthodontist appointment, something like that. So she divided up her class, and I got 5 of her students, and a coworker got 5, and another 5, and another 5. And we taught in Missouri. And so I was just going to have her kids for like 15 minutes at the end of the day. And after we had already packed up and we were waiting for the buses to be announced, because everybody came and went via buses. We had first round, second round, third round. I usually ask my students, do you want me to reread a book that we've already read before? And so they selected How to Heal a Broken Wing. Well, from her class, I got a boy in my classroom who is like 5 going on 15, right? He had older brothers. He knew more than everybody else. He played basketball harder than anybody else. I would call him like kind of a toughie, almost kind of like a bully. Okay. If I'm being honest, he would make fun of other kids. He just was tough. And 5 going on 15. So anyhow, I started to read this book, and the story is essentially a bird hits a window in a city. I think it's probably New York City. And the bird falls to the sidewalk, and nobody notices the bird except for this one child. The child and his mother pick up this bird. They take it home. They heal this broken wing, and now the bird is about to be released out into the city again. Well, I'm about halfway through with this book, and it's our last time for us. Everybody has to go. The buses are here. Third round, everybody, let's go. And this boy is like on me. What happens to the bird? What happens to the bird? And I said, well, if you want to come back tomorrow in the morning, I'll read the rest of the book and let you know how this. And he's like, no, but just tell me what happened to the bird. Did he get better? I said, you just got to come back tomorrow. He's like on me all the way down the hall. Like, tell me what happened. I was like, just come back tomorrow. I didn't think I would see him in the morning. First thing in the morning, he comes right into my room. I read the rest of the book for him. These are the kinds of books that we make sure that we have students get exposed to. We need them to feel and love these books. Now, some of these books are silly and funny, and those are great as well, but we want to have a mixture of books in there. Some of them are silly and funny. Some of them make us feel deeply. And How to Heal a Broken Wing is one of those. Also a great book for writing instruction. Okay. So how do we plan it out? We find a text that's significantly higher than what they can read on their own. Teachers doing the reading. We do repeated readings of that same text, and students engage in extended conversations that are driven by text-dependent questions, and then they respond by drawing, talking, or writing, both collaboratively and independently. This is from Doug Fisher and Nancy Frey. They did an article in the Reading Teacher, but they also wrote a book called Text-Dependent Questions. And that's the book that Dan and I really used as our guide in writing those units, along with a couple other resources. But these are research-based practices and really based on the work of Fisher and Frey. So I'm going to go through these very quickly because I've already been talking for 20 minutes and I don't want to shortchange you on the other side. So if you want to just take pictures of these, that's totally fine with me. But what we need to make sure that we do is that we start with a way for our students to know how to turn and talk, right? Because in those earlier grades, oftentimes they turn and then they he, and then nobody gets anything done. So we want to make sure that we have multiple opportunities throughout our day to practice, turn to your partner and talk. One of the things that I do now is I go in and I work with schools, and I had the teacher say to me, I've been using your interactive read-alouds. I'd love to see you do a lesson. I said, excellent, I'll do that. Tell me which book you're on, what day. Great, awesome. So I'm reading, I said, turn to your partner. I didn't even get the word ner out. And all of a sudden, pandemonium started happening. You had students going like, you be my partner. I'll be your partner. Kids were like running across the room so that they could be next to the cool kids. And there's always that one student who's kind of sitting there by themselves. I was one of the last to be chosen kind of person, so I think it traumatized me. So I always keep an eye out for those students, right? You don't want to have that student feel like nobody wants to be with them. Assign your partners ahead of time. During an interactive read aloud, they've got to get in and they've got to get out. We don't have time for hands to be stepped on as they're scrambling across the room. They need to be sitting right next to each other. Turn to your partner, talk about yada, yada, yada. All right, back to me. Needs to be super quick. So assign partners ahead of time. It will save you an incredible amount of time and save you for some pain. Here's some things that you could have them turn and talk about. So describe, how are so-and-so and so-and-so alike? How are they different? Compare, explain, evaluating, inferring. We want to make sure also that we provide wait time. We oftentimes ask questions to students, and maybe what we want to do is have everybody answer, right? Maybe you're going to ask a question and then you want everybody to answer at the same time, whether it's through an interactive read aloud, or maybe you're just asking something about a math problem, right? And so one thing that we want to make sure that we do is we offer some wait time. So one thing that I always do is I had them just whisper it into their hand. So if I'm going to ask you a question, you're going to whisper it in your hand. Are you guys ready? Yes? Okay. Here's your question. And they have their hand over their mouth, which is strategic, right? And they're going to whisper it into their hand until I give them the signal, and then they all respond. So when you're asking students to talk, sometimes you want them to all respond at the same time, and sometimes you just want them to respond to their partner. But providing that adequate wait time is really, really important. So they have to have time to process the information, to formulate their thoughts, and then also organize that into a language that they can use to express themselves. We also want to be on the lookout for interesting words, vocabulary words, encourage students to use those words. We'll talk a little bit about vocabulary as we continue on. During a read aloud, we want to make sure that we're introducing them to new vocabulary, text structure, new content, and of course, the joy of reading. We want to build knowledge. We can oftentimes build knowledge through content baskets. So if you're reading an informational text, maybe you're reading Creepy Carrots. I don't know. Maybe you have a basket about how fruits and vegetables are grown so that they can build content knowledge around that fictional book. If you're reading How to Heal a Broken Wing, maybe you have books about buildings in the city, communities, different types of communities. So you could build content knowledge around your fiction book as well. Okay, so I'm getting to the good stuff here, guys. So now we're going to talk about planning. So when we plan our interactive read aloud, we need to be reading the book again and again and again and again, because we have to slow down our thinking. We're so good at making meaning for texts that are simple for us that we have to really slow down our thinking so that we can see those little twists and turns our thinking is doing and ask ourselves, how did we figure that out? So when we plan, usually like we're reading that book, like I probably read the book 7 or 8 times before I actually start to pick the questions I want to use. I just am looking for those different changes in my thinking. So first thing we want to do is make sure that we have the key ideas and details. So what is this page or what is this book mostly about? What's the most important part of this section or maybe this book? And then answering those who, what, when, where, why, how questions. We usually call those right in the text or right there questions. These are books that you can just go back and find the page and it'll say, you know, who that was or where they were or something like that. Now we want to pay attention to craft and structure. So how does the text work? Is it question and answer? Is it in chronological order? Are there flashbacks? Those types of things. How does this paragraph work? Might be another question. How does the sentence work? Text features, and then also word choice and meaning. And then integration of knowledge and ideas, or how are the characters feeling and how do you know? And how do the author and the illustrator work together? And then we want to go deeper. We want to connect students' experience within the text. So did you make a connection with this text is basically the question. Think about the author's purpose. Think about the moral or the lesson of the book. And what does this book make you think about? We want to make sure we're going deeper. So I'm going to share with you this book, Neck and Neck. And then before we do this, I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to be sending, well, that's not true. ESGI is going to be sending you this unit, okay? So this unit for Neck and Neck, you'll have a whole week worth of lesson plan. So don't worry about copying down all the prompts because you're going to get them, okay? So I'm going to send all of that to you, but I want to demonstrate what it looks like with the book. And so we're going to read Neck and Neck. Would you please comment if you already know this book? And I'm going to go ahead and try to play it. Let me make sure my sound is all the way up. And if you can't hear it, will Brandy or Kristen hop in?
Neck and Neck by Elise Parsley.
It's a long pause. What? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop for a second because I also have this up from YouTube. So let me go ahead. I don't know why it's
Life
not.
at the zoo was glorious for
All right. Let me go ahead and bring this up in YouTube and see if this works a little bit better.
Neck and Neck by Elise Parsley. Life at the zoo was glorious for Leopold. Every day kids laughed and cheered, and the snacks, oh, there were such delicious snacks. This morning began with the usual squeal of admiration. Oh boy, the tallest animal in the world. I bet he can see all the way to my house. I just love this guy. At that, Leopold sighed and turned and gasped at the gleaming smile bobbing beside him. It's just like the real thing, only better, Leopold heard between giggles. This giraffe is so cheerful. Well, sheesh. I can be cheerful too, Leopold grinned. It zooms and it bounces, said the kid. I zoom, I bounce, thought Leopold. It's flexible, said the kid. It smells fresh. And I don't have to keep feeding this giraffe. Leopold glanced at the snack dispenser. Ah, rats. He huffed off to his favorite tree for some alone time. Well, see if I care about you and that grinning goofus. Up in the prickly acacia tree, Leopold sniffed and sulked and, ouch, was struck by an idea. He chomped off a branch. Charge! Blam! And now that I have your undivided attention, bring on the laughter, the cheers, a fistful of snacks. Huh? Leopold pondered where he had gone wrong when... Ah? The kid hooted and danced and tripped. Leopold watched a dozen scrawny necks drift up, up, up. To save or not to save? Not to save. Leopold alone would be adored. Right? Wah! Leopold stomped back to his tree. Honestly, those shiny airheads have ruined everything. Next thing you know, they'll be taking over my habitat. Leopold groaned and sighed and stretched. He cleared his throat. Fine, I give in. I just can't compete. The kid jumped up. You did it! He squealed. You saved them! You used your real, live, fuzzy, smelly, long neck and you saved them! There was laughter. There was cheering. And the snacks? Those snacks tasted better than ever.
Okay, so let me go ahead and bring my slide deck back up. I'm just going to keep pressing buttons until
The end.
Until I have it up. And I'm going to go through. I'm glad to see this is a new book for a lot of you. I love this book. We're going to start this from the current, and let me know right now. You should be seeing my slide deck. If you are not seeing my slide deck, will you let me know? Yeah, Brandy, this is such a it's such a silly book. Okay, so who was Leopold? These would be some questions that we could ask. Some people might say, some little kindergartners may say that it was the boy, right? But we want to make sure we understand who it was. How did Leopold feel about the balloon at the beginning of the story? And then make a prediction. Stop after reading where it said charge. What do you think will happen next? And then each day we're going to ask students to think about a part of the book, and then we'll go, deeper and deeper. So this is what the response page might look like. You may have students write in, respond in writing. You may not. You may decide, you know what, just today we're just going to turn and talk. Tomorrow we'll respond in writing. Okay. So readers make predictions as they read. Leopold said, charge. What do you think will happen next? So you just pause before you've read the rest of the story, have them make a prediction, and then come back. And then we say, was our prediction correct, or did the author surprise me? The next day, we might do this with the students. This is where we're going to put the story in sequential order. So these are word cards, and you can put them in a pocket chart if you want to. We've also put them onto a slide deck, so you can move them on a smartboard screen if you want to. But students put those in order and retelling the story. This is such great practice for them, especially later on when students are asked to read a section of text and then retell the story. This is very hard for students if they haven't had lots and lots of practice. So this is great for oral language. It's great for storytelling. It's great for retelling a story, reading comprehension, all of those good things. Another day, we're going to ask these questions. Readers infer to help them understanding what's happening in the story. Look at the page where Leopold saved the balloons. Why do you think Leopold chose to save those balloons? And then also characters. Knowing the characters help readers to understand what they're reading. You can get to know a character by thinking about how they look, the things they say and do, and the way that they feel. Think about Leopold, about how Leopold felt at the beginning and the end of the story. And then why do you think that those feelings had changed for him? So really doing character analysis, and believe it or not, 5- and 6-year-olds could do that really well. And then this is probably the last day of the week. So each day would be a different prompt. Leopold saved the balloons. Do you think that was a good decision? Explain your thinking. So we always ask students, if it's a yes or no answer, we always ask them to explain their thinking, because we don't want to say, yes, the end. No, we want to make sure that they can explain their thinking. So those are the 5 days prompts that you'll be getting in an email, okay? Also in vocabulary, there's words like glorious, admiration, pondered, sulked. And then we have that tier 3 word habitat. There's also words that aren't included in here, like hooted, like he hooted. Like, what on earth does that mean? Some students may not know. But when we look at those words, glorious, admiration, pondered, sulk, we can not only define those words, we can also come up with synonyms and antonyms. And now we're really expanding the vocabulary. So when we're teaching this book, we're going to be taking a multi-day commitment. So each day we're going to read it for a different purpose. And then we're going to scaffold our instruction to help support students' meaning making within the text. So we don't want to do for students things that students can do on their own. So sometimes, I've been guilty, and I told you my story with Deanna of how I'm like, my students can't do that. And then they did, right? Sometimes I'm guilty of doing too much for students. So instead of that learning sometimes happens in the struggle, as they say. So when students turn to talk, my role is to be right there next to them to listen to the students. If I'm finding that they're all lost, because that'll happen. Sometimes you just, grab too deep, right? It's too much for them. There wasn't enough scaffolding there. Sometimes if I notice that it happens, then I know that I need to add some more instruction. But I have to also be ready to pull that away so that I'm not doing too much for students. How I handle that is if I'm listening and I'm like, okay, they're lost and they're lost and they're lost. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just ask a few questions a little bit louder to this group of students so that other students can hear it, and that gets them back on track, okay? Otherwise, I might say, hey, you guys, turn around. Mrs. Wills picked the wrong question. Turn back towards me, and let me ask this a different way and see if that helps you, right? But if sometimes it's just as easy as, being a little loud, and then students listen to it. So usually on Monday, I had students usually on Monday, we read that book from cover to cover on Monday and Tuesday. And then we skim to those sections on Wednesday and Thursday. And then on Friday, we read that whole book one more time. And what has been helpful is having a video version of it, because it's another form of fluency, but you really have to have the book in order to do an interactive read aloud. This is me teaching. You know, for whatever reason, I always have like these strange looks on my face, but this is for the book Insect Detective. So what do we know about insects? What did we learn? And are there any misconceptions? So I'm gathering information. This is a long time ago, and I have really fat knees. I'm going to move on. So that's not good. This is Deanna. She's in with a group of students as well. And this is basically what it looks like. I mean, you are right there with the students while they're having a conversation. Interactive writing is something that you can do because of the science of reading. So much work is done with dictation that interactive writing, where they see a model of a correct sentence, isn't as neat as it used to be. We used to make sure that, you know, with a balanced literacy approach, we wanted to make sure that we showed a correct sentence structure. But we're doing that through dictation. So not as much interactive writing as we used to. And then we have students respond. So this is to the book Koala Lou, which is like one of my favorite books. So that's a great one. And we want to make sure that we're digging deeper. So we have those rich conversations about the text. We offer questions that help students develop a deep understanding of the story. So in kindergarten through second grade, we might explore different strategies for each day, but 3 through 5th grade, they're going to use those strategies and interweave them on a continuous basis. So in K2, I'm going to give one strategy on this day, and another comprehension strategy on a different day, and another comprehension. But 3 through 5, they're going to be using multiple strategies as they're reading. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you guys. We want to make sure that we're unlocking comprehension. So we want to activate their prior knowledge. We want to make sure that they're noticing text structures, that they're modifying and clarifying their understanding. They remain curious about the text. They fill in the missing pieces, and they're able to summarize. That's a point of comprehension. So I'm going to run through these strategies very quickly, and they're kind of in order of Monday through Friday. Okay, so predictions is something that we definitely want to make sure that we're doing before we've read the whole book. I mean, we don't want to make a prediction after we've read the book. What do you think is going to happen? Because that doesn't make sense, right? So we have to read to a certain spot, stop, ask them to predict what they think is going to happen next, and then we can continue with the story. There are some books that we ask them to predict what might happen if there was another page. If the author was going to add another page to this book, what do you think might happen next? A great example of that strategy is where we use it with the book Piggy Pie. So if you're familiar with the book, the witch looks at the wolf, and the wolf looks at the witch and says, "Oh, I'd love to have you for dinner." And what they, you know, of course, we know that they're talking about eating each other. And they have these little cloud thought bubbles, right? So we ask, what do you think will happen next? So that would go beyond what's already in the text. You know, we're adding another page. So this is Turkey Trouble. This is for the book, a prediction for the book Otis, which is such a good book. And what I love, if you look at this illustration, you can see that the student did make some, you know, put some words on there as well. But look at the illustration. You can see really that meaning making took place in that illustration. So that's a great example. Here's another prediction. This is for the book Knuffle Bunny. Where Trixie loses Knuffle Bunny, right? Another strategy you might do on Monday, if you're not going to do predictions, sometimes visualizing is a great one. So this is Leonardo, the Terrible Monster. And so Leonardo describes a monster. And so instead of showing the picture, I don't remember which monster it is off the top of my head, but instead of showing the picture, we don't show the picture to students, and they draw a picture to show, you know, what they think that monster might look like. Readers visualize pictures in the story. The book says Leonardo didn't have 1,642 teeth like Tony. Draw a picture of what you think you're visualizing. So that was the prompt that we had. So Tony with all of his teeth. One thing that I think, whether you use interactive read alouds or whatever read aloud you're going to be using, one thing that I think I would ask for you to consider changing is when you're reading the story. I have a picture book here. So oftentimes I used to read the story like this, and I'd be like, getting like all of this neck cramps as I'm showing. And then you go like this and the students go, I didn't see that. And then you go back to show them, right? Drives me crazy. So instead, what I would ask you to do is to read the story like this. And then when you're ready, you go like this to show it to the group, right? And then you turn the page. And the student says, I didn't see it. Say, you know what? We're going to read this book tomorrow, and I'll show you that page tomorrow. We're training students to pay, like they get second and third chances. Like, when you switch to this way, students are going to be glued on you, right? They're going to know when your voice stops. They may not be watching you while you read, which is totally fine. They don't need to be watching you to be listening. But when your voice stops, they know I'm going to be seeing the picture soon, so I need to put my head up so I can see it, right? They're paying attention to what you're saying. And so we want to make sure that we foster that and that we don't make them, first of all, it makes you a little crazy by having, oh, let me go back and show you again. You missed that page. Okay, I didn't see it either. Right, drive you crazy. Instead, don't do that. Just say, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you this book tomorrow, and you'll be able to see it tomorrow. Okay, more on strategies. Schema is something that you would do with an informational book. So what do you already know about insects for insect detectives? What do you already know about owls? This is also schema. This is, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. I'm going to try to turn it up as loud as I can, but this is Chatterpix. If you're familiar with Chatterpix, let me know. But it's a great way for students to tell what they already know. Let me see if I can turn this up a little louder. Let's see if I can get this.
These heads change colors when they're scared.
So turkeys' necks change colors when they're scared. So Chatterpix is such a great way for students to share what they already know about something. And you can incorporate with a craft. So it's
These heads.
Okay, we don't need to hear that again. We know that. A lot of people, you love Chatterpix. I do too. I think it's just such a great way to have a demonstration. And also there's that standard about incorporating technology to publish, which that's a great one. You can like check, got it. The other thing that's amazing is that in that Chatterpix, you download it and you can send it to parents. And I think about how much I would love to have that little bit of history from my son when he was in kindergarten or first grade, to hear his little voice, right? That would have been a great little artifact from kindergarten or first grade. So Chatterpix is a great little way for those things to be shared. And you better believe that they get shared out to family, because I would say I would be in town when I was in Missouri, and people would say, oh my gosh, my sister shared that video of Aaron doing that. It was so cute. And I know that you're his teacher. Chatterpix is an app and it's free. So like that's right in my budget. So you basically, I'm going to tell you really quick, it's super simple. You can do a picture. Like students can draw a picture, they can do a craft, but you'll take a photograph it in the app. You photograph it in the app, you draw a line for where the mouth is going to move to talk, and then you hit record. And then record 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then the student starts to talk. And then when you hit save, then the mouth moves with the words, and then you save it as a video. So it is so good and it's so free, and it's one of my favorite things. So Bat Loves the Night is one by Nicola Davies. I love her book as well. Bats Hunt at Night. On the second day is when we do retelling. So usually that's going to be something that we do on the second day. You can see this is a really old picture because we've updated those the cards that are put on that black board. But my students put the cards in order, and now they're turning to their partner to retell the story. So Christopher is the one in the striped shirt. He was my second language learner. JC is the blonde. And so they are talking to each other, but they'd forgotten what came next. So they just look over to the pictures to show them. Okay. So I will say, boys and girls, now that we have the story in order, turn to your partners and begin retelling the story. Peanut butters are going to go first. And so Christopher's the peanut butter. So he will start. And then I'll say switch, and JC has to pick up right where he left off. and continue to retell the story. Then I say switch. Christopher has to pick up right where she left off, and we go back and forth. That is a great way. First of all, they're listening to their partner, and they're retelling that story again and again. I'm watching, listening to everyone. I want to make sure that we've gone through that story about 2 or 3 times before we bring our attention back. Think about how much oral language is taking place at that time. It's a great way for students to become more comfortable. Incorporate in transition words. Then next, after that, finally, in the end, those types of things can be added in there as well. But this takes students from 0 to hero when it comes to retelling because they've had so much practice with that. So retelling the story, if one student gets to the end of the story and it's not time to have their attention back towards me, they just start up from the beginning again. And then you could put it in a pocket chart. You can tape it onto a piece of chart paper. This is for the Bear Snores On. This is in a pocket chart. This is for like a 2nd grade classroom. This is for the book Crickwing. This is also a 2nd grade version. This is for Velma and the Way Cool Butterfly. It's a great book. This one is The Bear Snores On. So after we've done the color version, students have their own version that they have to put in order, and we try to incorporate that with the craft. Another strategy that we might use is cause and effect. So this is the book, The Easter Bunny's Assistant. If you're familiar with that book, the skunk gets really excited. He's excited that he's going to be dyeing Easter eggs. And so every time he gets excited, you know, he makes a little skunk smell. And so anyhow, that's so you can do cause and effect. Now, when we get to day 3, we have a variety of different strategies we could use. We could do characters. So these are all kind of interchangeable. So we might do characters, we might do inferring. So I'm going to share these. Day 3 and day 4 are interchangeable. So this is Otis. We're talking about characters. What are some of the character traits of Otis? He's happy, and also he was sad in that story. Scaredy Squirrel. How was he at the beginning? How was he at the end? We might talk about setting. So this is for Knuffle Bunny. What was the setting? It could be the time, the city, when Trixie was too little to talk, right? So it may not be a specific time, but a time in somebody's life. We don't have to spend a lot of time on setting because that's usually couple discussions. They're pretty good about setting, but it is something we want to draw their attention to. Figurative language. So this again could be day 3 or day 4. The book in November, we look at different parts where the author said something, and then what do we think she means by that? So the bed is white and silent, life can hide beneath its blanket. What we think she means is that there's snow on the ground, right? But she just uses this amazing language. Anyhow, I could go on, but I won't. We'll keep going. The bed is white and silent. The snow is covering the ground. So again, we have lots and lots of opportunities for students to respond. This is a 1st grade example. We might also do this on day 3 or day 4, make a connection. So this is from the book, The Relatives Came. So this is what happened in the story. I made a connection to my own life. We might also, here's another connection. So this reminds me of, or have you ever? So Jasper was afraid of creepy carrots, write about a time when you or someone you know was afraid. And so they wrote, I don't like flying in an airplane. Scaredy Squirrel, inferring also. Why do you think Scaredy Squirrel played dead? And so there's a little explanation there. So you have to read between the lines to find that answer. And then on the final day, we do opinion writing. Almost always on Fridays or the last day with that book, we'll do some opinion writing. And so that's an example of a 2nd grade response. This is The Relatives Came. Okay, so we're going to talk really quickly about vocabulary. I want to check the time because we still have some more work to do. So I'm going to talk about vocabulary. Newspapers have probably statistically the highest rate of rare words per 1,000, followed by popular magazines, comic books, and then children's books. So oftentimes we think about, they're watching YouTube videos or they're watching like an informational video about polar bears or something, right? And we think about those being really rare words. But in reality, in our classroom day, they're going to experience more of those rare words in children's books. I gave you some examples already. And when you're on the lookout for these rare words, words that don't show up very often, they're going to pop up all the time. TV has a lower incidence, and then adult conversations also have a lower incidence of rare words. So, you know, in the past, we would have these incidental conversations, and that's just exposure. But when we have exposure to vocabulary within text, we incorporate explicit instruction, then we have more of a permanent intentional learning, which is what we definitely want to do. So many learners accumulate high quality vocabulary through reading, but instruction and vocabulary gets the job done faster. So it's not just through osmosis. We want to make sure that we instruct them at the same time. This is what our vocabulary page looks like, and you'll get this in your downloads when you get that. So for example, the word muttered. That's to speak low, quiet, usually in dissatisfaction. But we aren't just talking about the word mutter. We're also talking about the word grumble, groan, complain, gripe, mumble, or whine. And then a non-example or an antonym would be to speak clearly or be delighted or to rejoice or celebrate or cheer. So we don't want to just teach them the vocabulary word. We want to build their vocabulary knowledge around that word, things that mean similar, things that mean something different, okay? And then we also want to give it to them in a sentence. Now, people always ask that, make it stick, what does that mean? What we want to do is we want to encourage students to use those words outside of that particular lesson. So we would have, if students came in and they said we were in the lunch line and the lunch lady was muttering under her breath, we'd be like, awesome, great, sad for her, good for us. We color in one of those little dots. We're trying to fill in as many as we can. And if you can look on this other side, you can see that there's usually 2 vocabulary words per week that we work on. And then we stack these so that not only this week are we working on muttered and arranged and all of those synonyms and antonyms, but we're also looking back to the words that we've used in the past. And what I found is by having this up on the wall, one, it reminds me as a teacher to use those words. You know, instead of saying, you know, I was nervous, I could say I was anxious, or I was restless, or I was impatient. We can use those big words with students, and we want to make sure that we do use those so that we can make those more permanent. What doesn't work? Well, me dropping my pen on the desk. What doesn't work is looking words in the dictionary, looking up words. If that worked, I mean, it doesn't work. What does work is talking about morphology and using context clues. That's really more for an upper grade conversation. That's probably not what we have here tonight, so I'm just going to move on. But understanding and talking specifically about if it has the word like like, you know, as in reunited, right? Or redo or return or some of those words, we can talk about what RE means, right? Or what DE means in front. Or what LESS means at the end. We can definitely help expand that. Morphology is looking inside of the words and talking about affixes and prefixes. I'm just gonna move on because I know that's not my crowd here tonight. I also want to make sure that we show the text. So if you have a document camera, sometimes you can just slide that book under the document camera for them to see. The videos that you have for YouTube also will give them an example of the text. But I love The Invisible Boy. It's such a great book. I'm just going to keep going because we are so almost done. We also do sentence study. And that's not going to be included in your downloads. That's like in the monthly units because we talk about, you know, different grammatical things. Also looking at sentences. So we're looking at nouns, we're looking at verbs, we're looking at punctuation, we're looking at adverbs, we're looking at all different types of parts of speech as well as sentence structure. I'm just going to move quickly through here, but we do talk about declarative sentence, imperative, interrogative, and exclamatory sentences. There's an example of, there we go. I knew we were going to get there. Go ahead and scan that because Brandy, you're going to tell us about that, right? I don't remember what this was. It gets a chance. Oh, I know. You can get a free year. It says it right on the slide.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was really great.
You're welcome.
We love having these webinars. in hosting these, and we appreciate everything that you shared.
Oh, you're welcome. And now I'm thinking I called you Brittany for some reason. Did I call you Brittany earlier? No?
I've been called worse, so I'm good. I'm good.
I wanted to also tell you guys that we have put comprehension tests in ESGI for the books that are in the monthly unit. So these are the ones that are like the year-long units. There's comprehension questions in ESGI that they've already been added. So if you have ESGI already and you have our engaging readers, you already have access to those. You don't have to buy anything else. That's the best part about ESGI. You get the program and you get all of those assessments included. So we have true and false questions, and then we have multiple choice questions in there. So those are already in the units. If you guys, if there's anybody here that uses our engaging reading, let me know if you didn't know about those in there. Some people, not everybody knows that those are in there.
We just want to thank you so much for your time here with us today, and let everyone know that ESGI is a proud sponsor of these webinars every month. So all the winners of the free ESGI have been posted in the chat, and we will be emailing you with your free year of ESGI and your $25 gift card. And don't forget to check your email within the next week for your certificate and a link to this webinar. And it will all be posted on the ESGI YouTube channel. So thank you, Deedee. Thank you, guests. And
You're welcome. You're
have
welcome. And I'm gonna I'll be sending this unit to ESGI and they'll be sending it out to you. So
Correct.
keep an eye out for that. That's where it's gonna come from.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Bye.